You all would also be competing with artificial intelligence. On top, you have Germany opportunity card, Chancenkarte, that was introduced last year. And then finally, you have native Germans. Now, the problem with capabilities is that if you have the same capability as everybody else, then it actually doesn't matter a lot because you would still not be able to get the job. And when you combine all these unfair advantages, then you are unique and you might be the best choice. Yeah, and that is the guy who actually also wrote the book, Antifragile. And even though it's a fancy word, it simply means that you gain from disorder.
Hi everyone. Recently, I got invited to University of Mannheim to do a talk for the students of University of Mannheim on how to find job in Germany. Now, I think it will also be very important for many of you who are trying to find a job in Germany. That is why I'm sharing the complete talk here. In case you want to talk to me, I'll tell you by the end of this video how can you do that. For now, enjoy the talk. Have fun.
All right, so welcome everyone. I'm super happy that you're all here tonight. We were very much looking forward to this event, and then I will hand over to our first speaker of tonight to audit. A warm welcome.
So hi everyone, you can see my name. I'm Rohit, solution focused coach as well as operations expert. But before I go into the details of all of that, in 2016, not very long back, around 9 years back, I was exactly in this position, but on the other side. So I was one of you sitting and watching all these alumni nights. And at that point of time, there was one question which I always used to think. What is the most important thing to get a job? Right? 9 years down the line, 2016, right now it's 2025. I'm on the other side of the whole platform. And hopefully with the experience of the last 9 years, I'll be able to give a better answer what I could give at that point of time. But before we do that, I also want to know from all of you, what exactly do you think is the most important thing to get a job inside Germany? Right? So if you say right strategy, how many would you say that is the most important thing? You can you can raise your hand. Okay, I think 4 or 5. German language? Ooh, that is a big one, right? We have almost like 15-20 people. Topic expertise, whichever job you're applying for. Okay, we also have like 16-17. Cultural fit? Only 3. And network? Okay. So we have almost a joint winner between German language and network. Okay, that's good to know. And of course, I thought about all of these 5 because that is why they are there as options. Is there anything else that you think is very important to get a job in Germany? Something which I just missed? Okay, perfect. Good. So I got the top 5 at least. Now, before I tell you what exactly I think, and I'll try to do it through my whole experience and story. So let's begin. So this is my journey. I try to operate in between the intersection of technology, business, and people. So I started with technology. So I was an engineer, and I even worked as a power plant engineer in India. After that, I realized when I was working in power plant that technology is something that we interact with a lot, but in the back end, it's always business. Business is running the show. And I was also in a village in India. So I wanted to escape the village as well as wanted to do something related to business. So then I moved and did my MBA, also worked a bit in business. Then I came to Germany because I wanted to have international exposure. Did master in management, that is from 2016 to 2018. I was here. Met all these lovely people at that point of time. And then I got a job in SAP in controlling. And while I was doing all of these business things, I again realized that, okay, business is good, but the problem is that a lot of the business problems are actually people problems because the decisions are taken by people, and there is a lot of stakeholder management going on. Then I said, okay, let's switch once again. So then I moved to corporate operations inside SAP. There you need to have an understanding of technology. You also need an understanding of business, but you also need a lot of people management skills. On top, I tried to become a coach. So I did a professional training, read a few psychology books, and now I also operate as a coach from 2024 onwards inside SAP. So I help some of the SAP colleagues with different problems. On top, I also operate as a coach or mentor to certain students, right, to certain professionals for education as well as career. So that is overall. And as you could see, it's not a straight line. It's a triangle. It's super, super diversified. I was going here, I was going there. And that is the reality as well. So the problem is that even though, when we are beginning our career, we think that, okay, we would get into something and we would become an expert and everything would be sorted. Life doesn't happen like that, right? That was the exact thing for me as well. When I was an engineer, I thought, okay, I would be a very great engineer. Didn't happen. Moved to something else. So there is a lot of uncertainty. And that is for me, that is for most probably you when you start job, and for everyone. I also know from a lot of my friends who thought something else, 2 years down the line, they were doing something completely different. So the uncertainty part is there in career. On the other hand, you also have certain new situations and certain existing situations, the competition part. So artificial intelligence. That is something that I didn't want to avoid because it is the biggest thing right now, right? If you work in any industry, you know artificial intelligence is something which is promised as something that would take a lot of jobs from humans, would do it at a very good quality level and a very cheap cost, right? So in a way, you all would also be competing with artificial intelligence. On top, you have Germany opportunity card, Chancenkarte, that was introduced last year. That is also a way through which a lot of people who have expertise are coming into Germany, and they might be also getting into the same job. They all would be applying for the same jobs that some of you would be applying for. And then finally, you have native Germans. They're lovely people, and they also come with their own strengths. So for example, a native German would be really, really fluent with German. One of the things that all of you talked about, right? That German is one of the most important things. Native Germans have that as native level. On top, they also come with their culture. So they are born and brought up here, so they understand the culture. And the second thing that all of you talked about, network, that was the second winner. Germans also have their own networks. So that means that they're also a very good competition. So you have these competition, you have this uncertainty. Now the question is, if there is so much uncertainty, which is only going to increase further and further, how do you really figure out what is the way to navigate this? And in the last 9 years, I thought that, okay, if there is so much uncertainty outside, the only thing you can do is actually focus inside. So that means rather than focusing on things which are not in your control, you need to focus on things which are actually in your circle of control. So that is why I bring to you a strategic game plan. Now, why strategic? Because there are a lot of tactical advices that you'd get, right? And those are very, very important. You need to know how to tweak the CV. You need to know how to apply, how to talk in an interview. You need to know all of that. But it's also very, very important that you really know what you want to do in short term as well as long term. Because career is not just your job, your next job. It's also 10 years down the line. Maybe you start your own company. So that is why the strategy game plan, at least from my perspective, is something which is very important, and it will help you not only right now, but also maybe 10 years down the line. Now there are a lot of elements of strategy. So I brought 3 points which are the most crucial, at least as per me. So first is goal. You need to have a clarity. What is your short-term goal and what is your long-term goal, right? And the goals would keep on changing. There is no doubt about it. The goal that you have right now, it won't be there, or maybe it would change after 2 years, after 5 years. But you need to have an understanding of what exactly is your goal. What do you want? The second is capabilities. What capabilities do you have? What capabilities do you need? And third is mindset. What kind of a mindset you have every single day when you are going through all these struggles? And we'll go into the details of all of this. Not a lot, but a bit. First, let me drink some water. So now I'll tell you a small story. So I think a lot of you have already heard Alice in Wonderland. Now there is a particular moment in Alice in Wonderland where Alice is going and she reaches a fork, and there are two pathways going, and then there is this cat. So Alice asks this cat, which side should I go? Which path should I take? And the cat says, where exactly do you want to go? And Alice says, I don't know. And then the cat says, then it actually doesn't matter which side you go. And that is the reality. If you're not intentional about your career, you're just taking, you're going with the flow, and at some point of time you'd be lost maybe. So that is why be very, very clear what you want to do. Now, there are a lot of different frameworks through which you can find your goal, but I really like this one. So this is also sometimes misunderstood as Ikigai, and it is also in part of in the book which is called Ikigai, but this is more or less a purpose diagram. But if you search Ikigai Venn diagram, you'd find it. It has 4 different elements, and I think the people who know Venn diagram, this is basically a Venn diagram of 4 circles. And the idea is that you need to find something long term, which is the intersection of these 4 circles. Okay? What are the circles? What you are good at. Second, what you can be paid for. Third, what you love. And fourth, what the world actually needs. Now, the problem is that most probably, if you try to do it, a lot of you won't be able to find the intersection, because that is the perfect job. Even I don't have that. Right? But the thing is that you start with some circles, and then you treat it as North Star, and you keep on adjusting depending on what things you are already fulfilling and what things you need to fulfill. So for example, when I got my first SAP job, that was a controlling job, I found what I'm good at, and then I found what I can be paid for. And then at some point of time, I was like, okay, let's move a bit, right? So you can adjust your role a bit, you can change roles, a lot of possibilities are there. But at some point of time, and this would always help you, so this could be your North Star, right? Now you have the goal. Now the question is, how do you reach these goals? So you need certain capabilities. Now the problem with capabilities is that if you have the same capability as everybody else, then it actually doesn't matter a lot, because you would still not be able to get the job. For example, you are good at, let's suppose speech writing. Artificial intelligence is also good at that. You can be paid for that. Artificial intelligence is actually taking less money. So who would get the job? Most probably not you, right? And that is the problem, that if you just are doing something that you are good at and you can be paid for, but somebody else is doing the same thing but can do that for lesser cost, that person is the best choice. So you do not only need the capabilities that you in general have, you need to have some unique advantages, some unfair advantages which are only yours. And we all have that, right? Everybody is unique. There is no single person who is double in this world. So you all have certain things which only you have, but you need to really find those things, right? So there is one framework that you can use, which is Miles framework. It has different parts. I can very quickly explain money. So money is a very strong unfair advantage, right? That is why all the CEOs, all the executives, they have a huge team which takes care of every single thing. That is why the top sports people have a team of coaches, a team of trainers, because they pay these people to take care of every single aspect. And that increases their unfair advantage, right? Similarly, location. All of you have an unfair advantage because all of you are in Mannheim. All the companies which are near this area, you have an easier access to these companies. So that is your unfair advantage. Similarly, Germans who can speak German, they have that unfair advantage. And when you combine all these unfair advantage, then you are unique and you might be the best choice. So let's take my example. So what happened was that initially I also couldn't get a job, right? I was trying to get into SAP and student job, somehow I got it. And then I realized that, okay, now there is a lot of competition. And I was very clear on what I wanted. So I started really working on my credibility. What do I mean by that? Every single task that I got in SAP as a working student, no matter what task it was, I give everything to that. I was like just crazy to complete that task to the best of the satisfaction of the people. Because then I have this group of people who say, Rohit is a good person, he does task very good. And that way, in 2 years, I created my network who all were willing to vouch for me. They're like, okay, if you take Rohit, good, he's a good guy, he can do it. Similarly, I also worked on my social skills, network, I also learned German, I also had certain expertise, and all of these together made me actually the best choice for the job that I finally got, right? So you have to kind of figure out your own unfair advantage. And then finally, when you have your unfair advantages, when you know which goal, what kind of a mindset do you need? And that is where I really like this word antifragile. It comes from Nassim Taleb. Yeah, and that is the guy who actually also wrote the book Antifragile. And even though it's a fancy word, it simply means that you gain from disorder. That means then when you see some hardship, you actually make the best of it, you improve as a result. And that is something which is very, very important because you would face hardship, at least some of you, in finding the job. Now, I was thinking, how can I explain this concept? And then I thought that, okay, let's do it mathematically. Right? This is something that I really like. So if you improve 1%, just 1%, every single day of the year, some of the mathematicians in this group, it should come out to be 1.01 to the power of 365, right? 1 plus 1% to the power of 365. Similarly, if you worsen 1%, it should come out to be 0.99 to the power of 365. Now, how do you think, how big is the difference? Anybody knows the numbers? What is the number? If you do 1.01 to the power of 365? Okay. So that's 37 and the other one is 0.03. So that means that if you just improve 1% every single day in a whole year, you would actually be 37 times better. Now, of course, reality is not like that, right? Otherwise, everybody would be Roger Federer. But the fact is that if you keep on improving with every single hardship, at some point of time, you would be unstoppable. And that is the fundamental theory. But you have to be willing to put that effort, right? One of the examples that you can have, let us suppose you apply to jobs, you get rejected. Now, people who are a bit fragile or a bit, not so much into that anti-fragile mindset, they would become afraid. They would stop maybe applying. The person who's resilient would say, I don't really care. Most probably they didn't see my CV, I'll keep on applying. A person who is anti-fragile would actually take that opportunity and would say, I got rejected, let's see, can I change something? If I have to apply for the same job tomorrow, would I do something better? And that actually makes all the difference, because if you keep on improving, sooner or later you would be the best person. And then I can give you my example. So how exactly happened? And of course, in 2016, I didn't know all of these theories. Right? In 2016, hardly I didn't know any of those theories. But if I see back, what did I know? So I did have clarity of my goals. I did know what are my unfair advantages. I also knew what are my disadvantages. Right? It was very clear to me that I cannot compete with Germans on German language. I cannot compete in certain things with somebody else. But I knew what are my unfair advantages, where I can tell that I am the best. And then finally, anti-fragility. Every time I got rejected, I was like, I have to do something about it, and I would always improve. And because of all of that, and by the way, in a single day, I got 22 rejections, just so you know. And that is why 2016, I had A0 German. I didn't have any IT or coding skill. I didn't even have a lot of money because I'm self-sufficient and self-funded. I had 1 year of amount in my blocked account. Otherwise, I would have gone back to India. I didn't have network. And of course, finding a student job was also a bit difficult. But 2018, I had already done my B2, so I could speak in German. I had finished MMM. I moved from having operations as my focus to information systems as my focus. I worked throughout my MMM every single month so that I always had money. I created a huge network in Uni Mannheim as well as SAP. And every single opportunity, I showed them my skills. I showed them my worth. I tried to portray that I can do the job if you give me the job. And that is why before 2018, I already had the job. So now there was a lot of framework. There was a lot of story. And in case you do not remember anything, even though I think you would get the slides, but still, let's say you don't remember anything, then you should just remember these 5 things, 5 lines. First, career is uncertain. For me, for you, for everyone. And it would just continue to be uncertain as you see how AI improves. Second, you need to have a strategy which is rather focused on what is in your circle of control. You need to know your goals, short term and long term. You need to identify, you need to figure out what are your unfair advantages. And if you don't have any, then you have to create. But I'm pretty sure you all have certain unfair advantages, even if you don't know them. And finally, try to be anti-fragile. It would really help you a lot. So with that, best of luck with designing your own career. In case you need me, you can find me through these links. Thanks a lot.
Q&A session.
Yes, we can do that.
So, thank you very, very much for a very insightful speech.
All right, that was the talk. I really hope that it was helpful for at least some of you who are trying to find a job in Germany. In case you like these kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. In case you want to talk to me, and I know quite a lot of you keep on writing me emails or approaching me on LinkedIn, I would give you a link to my website from where you can find my contact, and then you can reach out to me and we can figure out how can we work together. In case you like this video, you'd also like some of the other videos on my channel. You'd see the link to those videos on the screen right now. Have fun. See you in the next one.